If you've had 60K, 80K, 100K months before, and now it literally feels like you're pulling teeth to do between 10 and 15, you are not alone. It's not that your offer isn't good anymore or that you've changed and that you're not as good at marketing. It's simply that the market has changed, buyers have changed, and trust is at an all-time low. Prior, in 2020, you used to be able to post a Stripe screenshot, and that was enough proof for people to jump into your offer. Now, people are very skeptical. They don't have stimulus checks to spend. The economy is much tighter. And so, with that, we're seeing a rise in risk aversion. People are more afraid than ever of being burned by a coach or a service provider because they need this to work, whatever it is that you're selling, and they need it to be worth their hard-earned money that is honestly more hard come by today than it was even 2 years ago. So we're going to walk through in this video what the specific emotional triggers are that need to be present in your content to get someone to make a purchase decision. There are 8, and they all stem from what the brain actually needs to hear to buy. And so because trust is at an all-time low, you're going to have to hit on every single emotional trigger that is at your disposal. And so where posting a little bit of social proof used to have people sliding in and applying every single day, now people need to be supported. Their whole brain has questions, essentially, that your business has to answer before anyone is going to buy from you. So some quick context to show you that you are in good hands. I'm Kenda, the founder of Laney Media, and we are the only social media neuromarketing firm in existence. We scaled to 7 figures within our first 12 months of business. We had our first 6-figure month just 6 months into business. And our content system is responsible for over $323 million in revenue across over 3,000 clients. So to say this works is an understatement. And in the last week or so, we've had so many clients come to us that used to have really big months in their business, and their lead flow and sales has just taken a nosedive. Even in the last 6 months, we've had clients come to us who were only making between like $5,000 to $7,000 a month, and they were able to scale to $30,000 to $40,000 months without going viral, without running ads, without doing anything insane. And especially in this economy, that's a pretty big feat. So I'm going to share with you the things that we actually shifted for those clients, and we're going to break down the neuroscience behind why this is actually going to work for you so that you understand why you're posting every single piece of content, what outcome it should be generating, so that you can assess and look at your data to see if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, so that you can make those micro adjustments to increase your conversion. I've had so many conversations in my DMs with different business owners that basically all say the same thing, that one, their content is performing at an all-time low. So less people than ever are seeing it. Their content is converting at an all-time low. Lead flow is way slower than it used to be. And the people that are turning into leads, the people that are coming in and applying and doing sales calls, it's taking so unbelievably long to get those sales across the finish line. And I keep hearing the same thing, that it feels like pulling teeth now to get people to buy anything, even people's lower ticket offers. So like I mentioned previously, trust has never been lower. And I'm sure you've probably heard people that talk about marketing say that people buy because they trust you. People do not buy because they trust you. People buy if they trust you. They will not buy if they do not trust you, but people do not buy because they trust you. Trusting you is just a caveat on the road to making that decision. It's not the reason that people buy. And so I think people get really caught up in this because they're looking at their audience and they're seeing that people are asking them for advice. They're getting really good feedback on their content. You're getting DMs that are coming in, asking you questions, thanking you for your content, telling you that it's exactly what they needed to hear, but yet none of those people seem interested in purchasing anything from you. And so what that tells me is that they do trust you. Your audience does trust you, which again just shows that trust isn't what makes people buy. It's just something that has to be in place in order for them to even consider it. So this is the fun part for me. Why do people actually buy? What pushes somebody to make a purchase decision? Well, we buy anything when we recognize that there's a gap between our current reality and the reality that we want. That goes for products and services. In my industry, it's very cut and dry. There's a gap between where where the person's income is and where they want it to be. So that is a very clear transformation that I'm able to discuss in my industry. But a lot of people get caught up when they're not able to talk about monetary wins. And I have to tell you that monetary wins are only really effective for one of the triggers. So it's not even as impactful as you would think it would be. We can only really use that in one way. Whereas non-monetary wins, those can be shaped and spun to fit any of those different triggers that we need to hit home to. And so ultimately, the goal of your content is to help people understand that discrepancy between where they are and where it is that they want to be. And then people make a purchase from you when it's clear to them that your offer is the thing that bridges that gap. When it's clear that your offer is what takes them from where they currently are to where they want to be, that is why people buy. We have a really fun client who's in the mental health space, and this person works a lot with people who are dealing with anxiety and DPDR symptoms. And so those are things that are obviously not monetarily linked. Now, you could make the argument that you could connect it to potentially not being able to work or having trouble with running a business because of those other symptoms. And so you could make the argument that you could make that monetary leap, but honestly, you can make that argument with every niche. If you're a relationship coach, well, people tend to make more money when they are focused on their work and they're not distracted by things swirling around them and being total chaos in their personal life. You could make the argument that anything in the health related niche, where it's fitness, nutrition, or holistic healing, any of those things could also potentially be linked to income, because if you're not feeling your best, it's a lot harder to make money, make good decisions, be well focused. It makes things really difficult. So I would argue that you could make that monetary link for just about any offer. Even skincare. If you look your best, you feel your best, you're going to be able to be more focused, more strategic, make better decisions. So literally everything can be linked back to that. So I don't think that that's a super viable argument when it comes to the idea that you can't really build trust and build authority without having monetary wins. And while we're on the topic, there is a difference between trust and authority. People can see you as someone who has a lot of skills, knows a lot of things, has a wide variety of accomplishments, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they trust you. That doesn't mean that there's shared values, that there's any emotional resonance, or that you guys are going to link on more of a visionary level for, again, that thing that they want, the thing that your offer solves. People talk about authority all the time as accolades or client results or speaking on stages, anything like that. But that's not actually what triggers authority bias within the brain. So there's essentially a 3-part formula for authority based off of what we understand about what the brain perceives as safe, status, and ultimately relatability. So this is what I call the authority trifecta, which is vulnerability, aspiration, and controversy. I was talking to someone the other day about a book that I was listening to, and the book was about the business strategy behind Taylor Swift and her brand. And I thought it was really fascinating. As I was listening, I realized that what I was hearing from all of these stories of the way she used to interact with her fans, she went out of her way to apparently connect with over 500,000 fans when her first record was released. And so she really exemplifies that idea of like doing the unscalable, and that's why she's so wildly successful to this day. But as I was listening to these different stories of when she got her start and was talking to the record label and some of the business decisions that were made there, and her early days of how she interacted with her fans and how she built that trust with them, and even into some of the more controversial elements of her story. Of course, there's the element of controversy with people challenging her skills and basically whether or not she deserves to be there, whether or not she deserves the recognition that she's gotten. And so she's always carried kind of an air of controversy there because she's had a lot of critics. But then things like the Kanye incident at the award show and the controversy that kind of continued to follow her in connection with Kanye and the Kardashians, it really gave her that viral sauce, which goes back to that authority trifecta. She had the controversy. She, of course, has that element of aspiration. Even as a young teenage girl, when we were all growing up with her, she had that air of, wow, that's so cool. Like, she's our age, she's relatable, like I can see myself in her, but she has this super glamorous life and she's so well known and she's the thing that everyone dreams of being as a child. She's a star. And so there was that aspirational element even back then, but now especially we look at her real estate portfolio and even her relationship, like that stereotypical quintessential Americana dream, right? We all kind of see that in her, which also then brings it back to the relatability, that vulnerability part of the trifecta, because she's very open and honest in her songs. Whether you love her or hate her, she is honest about her feelings, about the way that she's experienced life, about her perspective. And so because she is so open and honest about that, even in her interviews and the way she interacts, she never comes across, I don't mean this in a negative way, but she never comes across as overly polished. She's very put together, she's very beautiful, she's very successful, but she also really carries that down-to-earth feeling through her micro expressions, through the way that she talks, her gestures, her facial expressions. And so we see that vulnerability piece there. And so that vulnerability paired with controversy and aspiration, it's that authority trifecta, which is ultimately what helps you be well known, go viral, attract a lot of clients, and be seen as an industry leader. And that vulnerability aspect is also what really ties into building that trust, because when we have that mixture of controversy and aspiration and vulnerability, because our brain doesn't trust what we view as too perfect, it makes us trust people more when we have that vulnerability aspect. And so that's how you actually build that trust. But again, that alone doesn't necessarily mean that someone is going to buy from you. It will determine if they don't buy from you, but it's not what is going to make them buy. So what actually does make someone buy? And is this a response that you can actually control? There have been some very interesting studies around the neuroscience and the way behavior is impacted by what our brain is doing. And so because of brain imaging like fMRIs and EEGs, we're actually able to see exactly what part of the brain is lighting up and see what the response is in the brain to different marketing material. And so these studies really seek to uncover how the marketing that we see actually influences the decisions we're making. And the goal was to see if we could see that on a neurological level. And apparently we can. So we know that when the brain is going to decide to purchase something, 3 steps that brain is going through to make that purchase decision. And different people, based on their life experiences and their kind of predetermined notion of how they see the world, those are going to affect 1, how quickly people move through that process, and then 2, where they tend to get stuck. So what part of their brain kind of latches onto different things and has to really think it over and spend more time in that phase before moving on to the next one. So starting in step 1, this is happening in the primal brain. This is your amygdala, your basal ganglia, and this is the part of your brain that is responsible for survival. It is constantly scanning for opportunities and threats, and we know that the primal part of the brain is above all else selfish. So it's constantly looking for what's in it for me. And because this primitive part of our brain is responsible for survival, it's constantly taking in information, over 11 million bits of information per second. And we know that only about 40 out of 11 million actually get through to conscious thought. So for your marketing to even land, for it to even to begin to move into phase 2 and 3, you have to get through that filter of the primal brain. And you do this in 2 ways with your marketing. Number 1 is by connecting with symptoms. So symptoms are different than what most people talk about in their marketing. For you, as the founder, as the expert, you know what people's actual problem is. You know what the problem is that people have that you can solve. But what most people are aware of is not the problem. They're aware of the symptom, the byproduct of what that problem is and the way it's presenting for them in their day-to-day lives. So I like to give the analogy of if you were a doctor and someone is coming to you and they have a sore throat, that is their symptom. That's the thing that's happening for them in their current reality that they are aware of. Your actual diagnosis, That's the problem. That's the cause of this symptom. So if you have a sore throat, maybe you have strep. That's your diagnosis. But you don't know that. All you know is your symptom, what is actively occurring in your day-to-day life. And that is the thing that you can actually get the primal brain to attach to. Because if there is a pain of some sort, if there's something that they're experiencing, it is constantly scanning for ways to alleviate that pain. If you're in pain, you can't hunt properly and you die. And so to cut through and grab the attention of that part of the brain, you have to help it understand that one, this is for me because it can see itself in the symptom, and two, this person can solve my problem. There is a solve for this problem. And so when you shift your content to speak to that, that is how you get leads coming in. That's how you grow your following, because that perspective shift of understanding that this is a problem that can be solved, it triggers a hit of dopamine, which then they associate with you. And so they binge your content because the brain wants more of it, and they end up becoming a follower and they end up becoming a sale. The second way to activate this part of the brain is by hitting home to a villain. The brain loves contrast. It's how it understands things best because it's thinking in binary processes, literally safe versus dangerous. And so because of that, providing contrast where it's kind of a this or that mentality helps the brain to understand, and easy to understand is one of those things that gets through to conscious thought. And so when it's applicable to them, and then there's that element of contrast, it perks up. And when you're hitting home to a villain, typically you trigger an emotion of some sort, which moves them into step 2, which is happening in the emotional center of the brain, the limbic system. So to speak to this part of the brain, there's 4 main things that you need to do. You need to, 1, tap into identity. So you want to hit home to the way that they see themselves, either explicitly or subliminally in your content. You need to narrate their desired outcomes. So help them see that you understand where it is that they want to go. So then you're halfway there with making the purchase, with getting them to make the purchase, because they're able to see the discrepancy between where they are and where they want to be. They have to do that before they can understand that you fill the gap. Then there's elevating authority. So that is that trust piece that we talked about, where the authority trifecta comes into play. And then finally is speaking to gaps and mistakes. So once you've made them aware that there is a gap between where they are and where they want to go, you then have to hit home to the fact that your offer is the thing that can bridge that gap, that you get these results for other people. That understanding is then going to move them into the justification phase. So once they understand that, they've decided that they want to buy from you. When someone's making a purchase, the decision is not happening right there when they're pulling out their credit card. The decision already happened. The decision happens when the emotional part of the brain goes, yes, I do want this thing. Then the justification phase is coming in to try and lower that perceived risk and make sure that they can justify to themselves making this decision. Because parting with money, parting with a resource that the brain sees as affecting their survival. So in the justification phase, you're wanting them to feel good about the decision, basically. And so this is where you're hitting home to the results that you get for other people and really uncovering how you got them there, so they can see themselves once again in the symptom, in the transformation, and see what that would actually look like for them. It's a form of future pacing, and then understand what the results are in a very tangible way that they could have, and seeing that people just like them got that same result. It helps lower that risk. The second thing is overcoming objections. There are preconceived notions, concerns, questions that people have that are basically reasons not to buy from you. And so you have to overcome those objections, because those more risk-averse buyers, like we talked about, that's where the 4 different buyer types come into play. What the type of buyer that they are really dictates how quickly they're going to move through those 3 layers of decision making and where they're kind of going to get stuck. So for expressive buyers, they care a lot about what the experience is going to feel like, the transformation. And so you need to hit home to more of that future pacing for them so they can really see what it would be like to work with you. Really important for expressive buyers. Whereas driver buyers, they more so just want to know that you can get them from A to B as quick as possible. And so they're moving into that justification phase very quickly because they're like, oop, yep, I want that thing. And then they just have to make themselves feel good about it. So they'll spend the most time looking at results and authority, because there's a little bit of an ego there too. Analytical buyers are going to spend the most time in the justification phase. They really have to lower the risk factor, and they have to feel like they've checked every single box, that they know everything that they could know, to make this as little risk as possible when they're parting with their resource. So you can see how you'll want to make sure that you're hitting home to all of these things in your content, because it's important to every single person's brain, all of those phases of decision making, but different people are going to spend more or less time in those different phases depending on what they're kind of predisposed to do. So what I would do is I would encourage you to go do a self-audit of your content and really look at which of those 8 triggers that I laid out are missing from your content. Because people are so skeptical, you really have to be super intentional about pulling their brain through those 3 phases. Otherwise, they're not going to do it because they'll figure that it's too risky. If you're missing even one of those triggers, they get hung up on that one thing and they won't buy from you. That's what happens when trust is really, really low. So I would do a self-audit of your content, see what's missing. And if you're really not sure, because you're not sure what those would look like, our team will do a completely free audit of your account. We'll look at every single piece of content you've ever posted and we'll assess for you which ones of those 8 triggers are missing from your content. And then we'll write you 3 to 5 pieces of content, again, completely free, that fills one of those gaps that you can take and post tomorrow. A lot of people come to those calls expecting to be pitched and they're shocked when they actually get so much information. And for a lot of people, it just clicks for them and they're like, yep, I know this is exactly what I need. And so we'll walk people through working with us if it makes sense. For other people, they take their audit, they go post the content and they get results. And so they're right back in men's to find out how they can get more of that content. So you can find the link below to that if you want to get one of those on the calendar. You just have to drop your Instagram into that link and get your call booked so that we can complete that audit and then review it live with you. That's all for this video. Thanks for being here. If you enjoyed this video, you will definitely enjoy our podcast. It's called the Social Media Millionaire Podcast. You can find the link to that in the description below as well. I'll see you in the next video.